All right. Okay. Welcome to week 3, everyone. I'm glad you're here today. For those of you who are at your exams and watching this video later, I hope you did well. But yeah, today we're going to be going over a couple other things. We're going to be doing something similar to like the gear tool that we did last week, or the gear assignment. And then we're going to be doing assemblies. So assemblies are really fun. You'll kind of notice that when you build things, you tend to use more than one part. So being able to combine all the parts you make in a virtual environment is always very useful. So we're going to do that today, and that'll also be your homework. But yeah, so the first assignment we're doing today, we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to make the engineering fountain. This is a pretty fun assignment. I don't know. I like it. Just for reference, don't do the engineering fountain for your final project. I'll talk about that a little bit later today as well. But yeah, I guess we can just get right into it. So in the Discord, I have this photo here, and then we're going to use this photo as a reference for our design today. So what we can do is we can download it. And then we're going to create a new design. So I'm going to close this. So there will come, like whenever you design something, you might want to use something that already exists as a reference, right? And what a lot of people would think that they would want to do is they would want to like take a photo of something and then reference it in the CAD. And the good thing is we can do that, right? So we're going to use something called a canvas, and the canvas will allow us to insert images into our design so we can create something, right? A lot of people would do something like use canvases to like take a blueprint of like a car and use the 2D images to create a 3D like version of the car using the 2D references, which is like a cool use case. But in our case, we're going to try to recreate the engineering fountain today. So we're going to create a canvas, right? So over here on the top right of your toolbar, there's an insert dropdown, and there's a canvas, and you see there's kind of like a explanation. There's like a 2D drawing of a car, and then someone designed a 3D version of it using the canvas. So we're going to click on that, and then we're going to find our image. So I'm going to select it from my computer over here. And then it's going to ask you to choose a plane. So I'm going to choose this like right plane over here. And then if we zoom in, you can kind of see that our photo is now imported into our design, right? And there's a couple of parameters that we can change. For this, we're not looking to be extremely precise, but you can see here like scale and stuff like that is changeable if you want to do that. Over here, I believe it's like the opacity, so you can like change how see-through it is. I usually like to leave it around 50, but if you want to change it, then that's fine. But I just press enter, and now you can see we have this nice canvas in here. I'm just going to hide the grid lines for this, so it looks a little bit more manageable. But yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to sketch out this engineering fountain, right? So I'm going to create a sketch, clicking right here. I'm going to select the same plane that the image is on, which is, in this case, it's the right plane. And then now we can kind of sketch it out, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a 2D profile of the engineering fountain, and then we're going to duplicate it just like we did with the gear tool, or with the gear assignment. So I'm going to create some lines here, and again, we're just kind of eyeballing this, so it doesn't have to be super exact. So I'm gonna do that. Just kind of get like a general shape. And then for this curve, if you like tried to make a circle to fit this curve, you'll see that it doesn't quite fit. And it's because I believe the engineering fountain is modeled after like the e to the x function. So it's actually not like a circle, if you didn't know. So fun fact of the day. So that means we're going to have to use a different tool other than a circle. But right next to it is the fit point spline tool, which is pretty cool. So basically what this is going to do is we're going to create multiple points along the curve of the engineering fountain, and then it'll create a spline, or yeah, it'll create a spline that fits all the points that we specified. And it'll be nice and smooth, and it'll be pretty close. So basically, the more points you have, the better, but you don't need to have like an insane amount of points because that's just kind of too much work. So here, I'm going to start at this point, and then I'm going to end at this point over here, and then I'll trim out the rest later. So if you want, I'm going to extend this a little bit just so it fits a little bit better. So I'm going to use the fit point spline tool, and then I'm just going to start following the curve down, and I'm just going to click, and every time I click, you can see like another point is made, right? And you can see as I continue down, these points are lining up with the curve pretty nicely, so that's good. And then when I get to the end of the spline, you're going to see this little check mark over here. Sometimes it just like floats in a really random spot and you're just going to have to find it. But clicking the check mark basically confirms your spline and it finishes it for you. So I'm going to click it, and then you can see we have a nice even spline going along this curve. If you're wondering what all these green dots and dashes are, it basically allows you to modify the spline to make it fit whatever you want. In this case, I'm not going to change it, but if you see, like if I wanted to, I could change it, and then it would like change the spline, and then now it's not the curve that I wanted. But you can see that you can change them by moving these lines. You can stretch them out vertically, or like if you move the point out farther, it stretches out farther, or if you make it closer, it makes it more linear. But yeah, it's pretty cool. To finish this, I'm just going to add a couple vertical lines, and then should be able to cut it away. Right here, I'm just going to add some constraints. So I want this to be perpendicular. I want all of these to be perpendicular. So I like that. And then I'm going to start trimming away. So for me, I put like 2 points of my spline on like the edges right here, just to make it easier for me to trim later. So you can see I have the trim tool enabled, and I can trim away right here, and I can trim away right there. And now we have 2 separate bodies. You might have like some green lines overlapping here, but it's actually nothing like for the geometry. Like you can use it to change the angle and stuff like I showed you earlier, but it doesn't affect the sketch at all right now. If I want to kind of see, because like the opacity is like still kind of high, if I want to see the sketch by itself, I can hide the canvas by clicking the eyeball on the top left right here. So you can see the beginnings of the engineering fountain, right? So yeah, does that make sense to everyone? Is anybody like having trouble doing this? You can raise your hand, it's okay. Okay. All right, so now that we have our sketch, I'm gonna hide this canvas now. I'm gonna finish it, and then I'm gonna extrude it, right? So I'm gonna select these two bodies. They should be nice and closed. For this example, it's not blue. I mean, it's not black. The lines aren't black, so don't worry. And I'm gonna extrude it. Maybe not that much. Okay. So here is our beginning of an engineering fountain, right? I purposely like extruded this like the quote unquote wrong way for this scenario, but I'll show you why in a bit. Because we're gonna go back and fix it. So here we have the engineering fountain, right? But we only have like 1/4 of it, right? Because you know there's 4 of these like pillar things, so we want to copy it 4 times. So if you remember the pattern tool, the circular pattern tool that we used for the gear on the previous assignments, we can do the same thing with like extrusions and bodies, which is really cool. So under the create, there's the pattern and then a circular pattern. So we're going to utilize this tool again. Right here, object type, it's set to bodies, which means we're selecting solid bodies. So in this case, I want to select these two. And then for the axis, I'm going to select this green one here. So in this case, it's like the vertical axis. And then it will start to create more pillars. So if I change it to 4, we're getting in the ballpark, right? I'm just going to press OK. But if you look at the top, you can see how it looks kind of funky, right? And it's because of the way we extruded it earlier. So I'm going to go back and fix this now. So if we go back into our timeline, again, Fusion's really cool because you can go back and edit things. So I'm going to go back in the timeline. I'm going to find this extrusion, which is this one right here. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to edit the feature. And you see right here, it says start. It's basically saying, or it's asking you, where do you want the extrusion to start? And typically what we've been doing in this class is it started on the profile plane, which is where you drew the sketch. But in other scenarios, you might want to do it differently, right? So we've done a couple offsets, I think. Oh wait, no. In this case, we're changing the direction. My bad. But yeah, the profile plane is very important. If you ever want to change it, it's right there. But in this case, we want to extrude it symmetrically. So if you see before, it was one side. So it only, right here, this blue area is where the sketch was made. If I click symmetric, it makes the extrusion on both sides. In this case, it also makes the extrusion like doubly as wide. So I can change this distance to be half of what it was before. So I'll change it to 0.5. And then when I press OK, you can see how all of it is like centered and very nice. And again, it's because of where we created these sketches and how we extruded. So where you place them is very important, and it can really affect how your design looks later on. But again, if you didn't do it how you wanted to at the beginning, you can go back and change it, which is really nice. So now we have 4 of these little pillar things, or I guess 8. But you can see how the engineering fountain has some more of these details on the side, right? So let's try to recreate them on our design. So, okay, yeah. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna create like a negative extrusion on this pillar. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go back in time on the timeline, edit this singular pillar, and then I'm gonna go forward, and then it should copy everything to all 4 pillars, if that makes sense. So again, I'm showing you some like kind of unorthodox techniques right now, just to show that you can kind of go back and change things, right? So normally if I was doing this, I wouldn't do the circular pattern right now, but you can do it, but you can also go back and change it. So over here on the bar, or there's a bar kind of on your timeline, you can move it back and forth to kind of like hide and show certain processes that you've used. So in this case, I kind of want to hide the circular pattern, and then I'm going to add it back later. So I'm going to drag this in the timeline, and you can see it's kind of grayed out now. And then also the circular patterns would disappear, right? And then what we're going to do now is we're going to add more, and then we're going to go like more forward in time by dragging the timeline again. And then it can like make those changes that we made onto the new circular pattern. So I'm going to create a sketch on our designing here. I'm going to show the canvas as before. And actually for this, I'm going to hide the bodies in a second. But first, I'm going to copy some of the lines. So I'm going to hold Shift, and you can see some of these lines are highlighted. I'm going to highlight everything except for the spline, and then I'm going to project it. So if you press P, there's this option called project. Oh, I didn't select all of it. That's weird. Okay, anyways, so you'll see it says 6 selected because I selected 6 lines, but project will basically allow you to take something from a previous sketch or extrusion or like geometry that you had before, and then utilize it in a sketch that you have later, right? And what's really cool about projecting is that if the original one changes, the projection will also change with it. So if you have a geometry that's dependent on something else, it's really good to use projections on your following sketches so you don't have to go back and constantly change a bunch of numbers. So yeah. So I've selected these lines. I like these. I'm going to keep them for this next operation. So I'm just going to press OK. And then they're going to show up as purple. So I'm going to hide the bodies over here just so you can kind of see a little bit better. I'm also going to hide the canvas just so you can see. You can see these lines are purple, right? So that's cool. We like that. Okay, yeah. But now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of copy this geometry, right? Again, you don't have to be exact because this is just kind of a demonstration. I'm going to use the fit point spline, but you can kind of do whatever you want. Last time, my TA just like drew like a happy face on my extrusion, and that's kind of how it ended up being, which I thought was funny. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm just going to try to copy this geometry over here, though. So I'm going to start like right here, and I don't know, just going to follow this line. Just kind of making my way over here. I'm going to end the spline on this line, and I'm going to create another one over here. So I like that. And then I'm pretty sure you can trim the projections or not. I forgot. Yeah, okay, you can. So I'm pretty sure I can okay. So I don't know if you caught that, but I finished the sketch because all of these lines are nice and contained. The projections do kind of extend a little bit outwards, but these bodies are still nice and closed. So I can utilize these with my extrusion. So I'm going to click on these two, and it defaults to wanting to add more material. But in our case, we want to subtract a little bit. So I'm going to go this way, maybe about 0.1 in this case. The operation over here is set to cut because we're removing material. And then I'm just going to press OK. And then you can see we have this little detail over here. However, it's not done on this side as well, right? So I'm going to mirror it. So under the mirror tool, we've done a lot of like feature or body mirroring, but you can also mirror features. Sorry, I was meaning bodies. We've been like copying or mirroring a lot of bodies, but you can like mirror operations or what they call features. So over here, I'm going to select this extrude. The mirror plane, we're going to select it to be on this right plane right here. And then it should cut it out. Here we go. Does that make sense to everyone? Raise your hand if you like want me to like go back and do it again. Okay. How far should I go back? The first negative extrude? Okay. So did everyone get the projection thing? Okay. So the projection thing is when I selected all the lines and I pressed P, and then it allowed me to copy the lines from the previous extrusion. And then I just drew a spline starting up here, making its way down to this edge, and then making another spline down here. Yeah? Okay. So once I'm satisfied with that, I finish the sketch, and then I created a negative extrusion. So over here, there's the extrude button, and then when I clicked it, it asks me to select the profiles that I want to extrude. So in this case, I want to change these two profiles by cutting them in. We're starting at the profile plane because we're starting where we drew the sketch, and then we're going to go inwards. So in this case, we're going negative 0.1 millimeters, but depending on your units or whatever, it could be a little bit different. And then the operation is set to cut because we're cutting away at the previous extrusion we made. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. And then how about mirroring? Everyone good on mirroring? Yeah, so I made this like squiggly sketch on the face of the extrusion itself, like right here. So I made it on here. I cut it out, and then I mirrored it to the other side, right? Again, there's a bunch of different ways of doing this, right? So I did like a symmetric extrusion, but the other thing I could have done is I could have just done a singular extrusion and then like cut it out, and then I could have mirrored the whole body instead. So again, there's multiple ways of doing it. This is just how I did it for this demo. Um, but yeah, there's no like wrong way to do it, or I guess there's no right way to do it, if that makes sense. Or there's no singular correct way. Sorry. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk around.
Just this question, I think everybody is asking this question. When you choose mirror, instead of choosing bodies, select feature. Because you don't want to mirror the body, you want to mirror the feature. So, is everybody clear with that? Mirror mirror, instead of selecting bodies, select features. If you're unable to select the feature directly from your object, you can select it directly from the timeline. It works that way.
Okay, I'll run it through again. Again, there's like many ways of doing this. But I'll just run through this process again. So everyone's made the sketch, right? Raise your hand if you haven't made the sketch. Okay. So I'm going to create that negative extrusion. Does anybody have the problems with the extrusion? Okay. Did you draw it on the face, or did you draw it on the plane? Raise your hand if you're having trouble with mirroring. Okay, so raise your hand if you don't have like the extrusion cut out on both sides yet. Okay, so again, if you haven't done it, what you can do is you would go under Create, Mirror, and then normally it's the object type is set to bodies, but in our case, we want to change it to features because we're going to copy an operation instead of a body. And then we're going to go in the timeline and then select the extrusion down here. And then we're going to select the mirror plane. So in my case, you can see this plane is cutting through the center of the pillar. And then I would press OK, but I already did it, so I'm just going to press cancel. But yeah, so if you did it right, you can move the timeline forward again and go like quote unquote like forward in time. And then you can see all of the other pillars have the features on them, which is what we're looking for. Does that make sense? All right, cool. The final thing to do for this assignment is to add like a base to the engineering fountain. So it's just very simple. I'm just going to select this plane on the bottom to create a sketch. I'm going to make this circle right here. And I want there to be a little hole in the center. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to finish the sketch. Oh, oops. I'm going to extrude it downwards, maybe like 0.2. And I'm going to press OK. And there we go. We have a simple engineering fountain with a little hole in the middle. If you want, you can add like the little blocks on the outside, but yeah, I'm not going to do that. But yeah. Is there anyone confused about this assignment? If not, we're going to go on to assemblies. What's up? Oh, for the circle on the bottom? Yeah, it's just like an extrusion, a simple extrusion downwards. Just make sure there's a hole in the center, because I think that's in the rubric. So, yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm doing some of these assignments in weird ways just to show you that there's many ways of doing it. If you think that there's a better way of doing it, honestly, just go for it. If you want to do that, I'm not going to stop you, and I'm not going to like take points off if you don't do it the way I do it in class. Uh, if you watched any of like the past videos, you probably noticed that I do it a little bit differently every time. So it's it's okay if you don't do it this like exact same way I do it. Um, but yeah, that was the engineering fountain assignment. The next thing we're going to do is the Lego car, right? So we're going to create an assembly in Fusion today, which is pretty fun. I'm just going to save this real quick. So to do this, I've already like compiled a bunch of parts in a zip file. So if you go under resources in the Discord, there should be this zip file called like Lego car over here. So you can download it. Again, I promise it's not a virus. Cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna upload that folder into kind of like my Fusion drive. So I'm gonna hit upload over here. Oh wait, I need to extract it first. Okay. So I extracted it because it's a zip file. I'm gonna select my files under Lego car. Oh, maybe I should make a folder first. I'm gonna make a folder. Lego car. So I'm gonna select all the files. It's gonna move the window in a weird way. I'm just gonna press upload, and then you're gonna see it's gonna start to populate the Fusion with all the different parts. Did anyone miss that? Okay, so I just made a new folder. If you can't open your data panel, you click this little set of 9 squares. It'll like show and hide this. I made a new folder and called it Lego car just for organization's sake. So you can make a new folder up here. But once you do that, you press upload. You make sure you've unzipped the file that you downloaded first. And then you select files from your computer. In this case, I found it in my downloads folder. You just select them all and then press open. And then you should have all the parts here. Everyone good on this? Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a new design. For an assembly, you actually have to save the document first. So I'm going to press Control S. If you're on Mac, it's Command S probably. So yeah, I'm just going to call it Lego car assembly. I'm going to show the grids here just so you can see it a little bit better. But yeah, I'm going to keep this data panel open because we're going to be referencing a bunch of these parts. But you can see here, now that I've uploaded everything, there's a bunch of different Lego pieces that I can choose from, right? And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building these Legos on our laptops in Fusion. So, like building in real life, you want to first pick a part, right? So I'm going to pick the biggest part as like my base piece, and then we're going to go from there. So again, make sure you save your file or else it won't allow you to put in different objects. But you can see from this photo, there's like, I guess it's kind of hard to see, but there's a big plate that spans the whole length of this car, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as like my base for my Lego car. So over here, there's like the 2x6 plate. I'm just gonna drag it in and then it will appear, right? So it like rendered flat. I kind of like the orientation. I can move it around if I want to, but I kind of like where it is. I'm just gonna press OK, right? And just like in our sketches, I've always told you to like try to start at the origin so everything is fully defined. Right now, this Lego piece isn't really grounded in space, right? I can move it around and it'll just kind of fly wherever I want. So I want to ground the first piece. So grounding it is basically saying this piece is going to stay here and I don't want it to move. And then when I make other pieces connect to it, all those pieces will kind of fly to this base piece instead of both of them flying to each other. Again, I'm just making sure this is locked in space. So to do that, I'm going to find the component up here. I'm going to right click it. And then there's this option at the top that's called ground. I'm going to ground it. And then you can see in the timeline, it adds like a little pin showing that this piece was grounded in the timeline. So that means if I ever wanted to move it, it won't let me, which is good. So now that we have our first piece, now we want to start adding more pieces to make a car, right? So for me, I just want to add these little axle pieces, right? So I'm going to drag it in. And you can see it's kind of like phasing through the block, which is not really what we want. But there's a bunch of different options for us, right? We can move it around, move it up and down, like side to side, forward and back. And you can even rotate it with these. I'm just gonna kind of move it over here, and then I'll show you how we can be more specific about where we place these. So I'm just gonna press OK. Yeah, what's up? Like grounding it? Oh, so if you go up here, like under the origin folder, you can see like the name of the component. If you right click it, there's going to be a ground option. For me, it says unground because it's already grounded. Yours doesn't have that. Yeah, no problem. Okay. So now that we can like insert multiple components into our design, we want to specify where they're going to be in space, right? So in this case, you can see this like axle piece is just kind of floating ambiguously, but we want it to be like exactly like right underneath this plate, right? And to do that, we're going to use something called joints. So joints in Fusion is how we can like put pieces together, right? And if you've done it in other CAD softwares, this like might be a little bit different, but essentially they do the same thing. So over here, there's this kind of like assemble area. I'm gonna click joint. So if I click the drop down, there's this joint button, or you can press J, and then a bunch of different options will pop up, right? So for this operation, I'm going to be selecting two edges on both of the components, and then the plate should fly into place. So over here, there's this two edge intersection tool. So I'm going to click on that. It'll ask me to select one edge and edge 1 and edge 2. So in our case, I'm going to select this top edge on the axle and this edge right next to it. And then it'll allow me to select two corresponding components on, or corresponding edges on the other component. So again, I'm going to do two edge intersection right here, and then edge 1 and edge 2. So I want this edge 1 to correspond to the edge 1 that I did on the axle. So I want this horizontal edge to line up with this one. So I'm going to click on this, and then I want this like lengthwise edge to line up with this edge because that's what I selected before. So when I click them, they should fly into place. There's a bunch of different things that I could change, like the alignment and offset. In my case, I don't want this to move from where it is, so I like it. Under motion, in this scenario, I want this to be rigid, right? It's basically just saying these two components will be put together and they shouldn't move at all. But there's a bunch of different options that we're going to go into in a little bit. But like you could have sliders. So if you have something that like slides back and forth, like maybe like a rack and pinion mechanism, something like that could be useful. But we're going to use Revolute in a little bit. For now, I want this to be rigid. You can also like preview the motion. When it's rigid, it just kind of like shakes it, which is kind of funny, just showing that they're not going to come apart. But I like this, so I'm just going to press OK. And now both of these components are combined into one piece. So yeah, I'll give you, I don't know, like 10-15 minutes to do this. Again, if you don't finish, that's okay. You can do it later. You have like a whole week to finish it. But yeah. I'm just gonna walk. Does anybody want me to walk through it again? Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna open up the data panel. I'm gonna choose this roof piece this time. Hello. Stop lagging. No. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna insert this little roof piece. I'm just gonna drag it up so all the edges are a little bit easier to select. And then I'm gonna want this roof piece to be right on top of this plate here. So I'm gonna hide this. I'm gonna create a joint. So I'm gonna go under Assemble and Joint right here. A bunch of different options will pop up. Again, I'm gonna use the two edge intersection tool because I'm gonna select these two edges and then have it connect to an edge here and an edge here. It's kind of see-through right now. But yeah, I'm going to click two edge intersection. Edge 1 will be this one spanning horizontally, and then edge 2 will be this one going like vertically. And then I can specify the edges for the second component. So again, two edge intersection right here. The edge 1 is corresponding to the first edge I selected earlier, so it's going to be this one. And then edge 2 is going to correspond to the second one. So the one I selected here should butt up to this one. And then the blocks just fly into place. Some of you are getting to the wheels now, so I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. The cool thing about Fusion and a lot of CAD software is that you can create assemblies in assemblies, right? So those are called sub-assemblies. So in our case, you can see that there's 4 sets of wheels and tires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sub-assembly with the wheel and tire. So I can just import that sub-assembly 4 times instead of having to mate all the tires and wheels, if that makes sense. So to do that, I'm going to create a new design up here. I'm going to save it as like wheel sub-assembly. And then I'm going to insert both the wheel and the tire. So I have this lovely wheel right here. I'm going to ground it in space. And then I'm going to insert the tire. And it may look like it's in the right spot, but it's not joined. So I want to join it together. So I'm going to move it away. And then I'm going to create a joint. So right here, in this case, I'm just going to be using the simple joint because I'm dealing with these circles. So I want like the edge of this wheel to line up with the edge of this tire. So I'm going to click the edge of the tire, and then I'm going to double click the edge of the wheel. It's going to fly into place. I'm happy with that. And then I'm just going to save this real quick. So now I have a whole like sub-assembly down here, the wheel sub-assembly, and then I can insert it into this current design. So I'm going to drag this in, if it will let me. Okay, I'm going to save it again. Okay, so you can see we have both the wheel and the tire in the assembly already, so then I don't need to do any extra work. So now what I want to do, I want to attach this wheel to this axle right here, right? So I'm going to create a joint. I'm going to rotate over here. And again, I'm going to be using a simple joint for this circumstance. So I want this round surface or round feature to line up with this right here, right? So at the face or at the bottom of this cylinder, there's kind of an edge there. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to rotate over to the circle right here. And then I'm going to select this circular edge right here. So I'm not selecting the whole face. I'm selecting the circular edge. If I double click that, the part will fly into place. And you can see the parts in relation to each other are right. Sometimes Fusion will have the part like fly like away from its spot, but then once you press OK, it'll fix itself. But you can see that like this wheel is like centered on the axle. And then in real life, this thing is going to spin. So instead of rigid, I'm going to change like from position to motion up here. I'm going to change from rigid to revolute. And you can see one of the parts is spinning in relation to each other. Sometimes like it'll be spinning the part that you don't want to spin, especially if it's constrained by other parts. And that's okay, because once I press OK, then it's all the parts are going to go back to where they need to be. So I pressed OK, and then you see this bottom axle piece is still connected to this plate, and now the circle is attached to it, and I can like drag it and it'll spin. Does that make sense? I'll just run it through again if you missed something. So again, I created this sub-assembly with the wheel, and then I'm going to import it into my overall assembly. I'm just going to drag it in, pull it out. In this case, the wheel is kind of like backwards, so I'm going to rotate it this way, 180 degrees. I like to get the component in like the general area that it wants to be, or at least the correct orientation, because if you don't, then sometimes Fusion will make assumptions about where you want the part to go, and it may not like fly and like mate in the correct direction you want. So again, I'm rotating it, and then I'm going to create a joint over here. I'm going to select this circular edge right here, and I'm going to rotate. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to select this circular edge, which is like the base of the axle. So I'm going to double click, the part will fly into place, and you see it's right now it's automatically set to revolute because that's what I had it to before. But if it isn't, you can change from position to motion over here, change it to revolute, and then you can preview it To double check, you can see this wheel is spinning. Then you just press OK. And now we have 2 tires on this Lego car. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm just gonna walk around. Okay, a little tip for the wheels. Um, Sometimes you'll notice that they're kind of spinning strangely. Let me see if I can recreate it here. So like sometimes your wheel will kind of like spin like this, right? And it's because we selected the wrong point for it to revolve around. So okay. So if I'm making a joint, I've gotten into the habit of zooming in really close to where I want to select because sometimes Fusion will like assume that you want to click on something and it'll snap to like the wrong place. So if you look closely, right, on this arc, when I approach like the middle of this arc, you'll see like this little icon snap to where my cursor is. With the green, red, and blue lines. It's basically like showing like the origin at which you want to revolve or join your part, right? So we want it to revolve around the center of the circle and not the center of the arc. So if I move my cursor a little bit farther and I make sure I'm just selecting the arc, you can see the little coordinate plane moves to the center of the circle, right? I can't really move my mouse to show you, but you can kind of see how it's centered on the circle. Again, if I move it closer to here, the coordinate plane is like on my mouse, but then when I move it and make sure I select just the arc, it's centered at where you want the axle to spin. So when I select that and I select this, it should spin correctly. Yeah. Anyone having problems with this? Okay.
Just to make sure everybody has filled in their attendance, right? Okay, copy. And nobody had issues with submitting their homework. Which they can do.
Yeah. So that's basically all for today. Um, your homework is to create your own Lego set. So I'm gonna post some resources later, but there's a bunch of different websites online that have models like already designed by other people, right? So it's really useful if you're looking for like hardware, like bearings and stuff. But for this assignment, you can use it to find Legos. So um, I'll post a couple links later, but that's basically what your homework assignment is. There's also extra credit if you want extra credit. Um, yeah, I'll go into that in a second, but this is a quick introduction of your final project. I talked about it earlier, but you're going to create your own model with at least 5 design features, and it just can't be like the engineering fountain or anything we've done in class. That's basically your final project. Feel free to get started now, or you can do it later. But yeah, in terms of extra credit, there's an Amelia Earhart airplane that you can model. It's kind of like out of scope for this class because it's like surface modeling, so I changed it to extra credit. So if you do want extra credit and you want to learn surface modeling, go for it. The instructions are in the slides that I posted. But yeah, other than that, you're free to go. Yeah, thank you for coming. See you next week.